Well, thank you so much, Shireen, for your very nice and generous introduction. I'm very pleased to join you today through this recording to share some thoughts and reflections on ethical finance. And let me congratulate you for picking and choosing this important topic. Very timely. ESG in a volatile world: profit, purpose, or politics. The particular focus on the ASEAN region is important as well. In different regions around the world, we look to the ASEAN for the great developments since the 1960s and how the good collaboration between the member countries enhanced trade, investment, and knowledge sharing in good partnership spirit. Having said that, and as perhaps many speakers before me emphasized, we live in a kind of a long-term perfect storm affecting us all. It's started with the COVID-19 and its impact on lives and livelihoods, the impact on jobs, growth, the deterioration on standard of living, the increased numbers of those who are suffering from extreme poverty had increased roughly by 100 million. Those who have been suffering from malnutrition increased by 250 million. And then we see the impact that some of the cures to the crisis of COVID had contributed to increased inflation through the stimulus packages. Of course, we know as well about the problems that the supply chain had been suffering from through disruption. So more of prolonged inflation that is going to stay with us for quite some time, lower than expected growth. So stagflationary fears are very legitimate. And this all was before the crisis in the Ukraine, with the war there that had, of course, devastating impact on the people, with casualties of and loss of innocent lives. But again, there is an impact on food, on energy, and many countries are facing financial challenges. Some recent figures are telling us that 107 developing economies, home to 1.7 billion people around the world, are severely exposed to at least one of the three global transmission channels of the crisis: the food, energy, and finance. And 70 countries, home of 1.2 billion people, are severely exposed to all three channels or shocks at once. This is the kind of world that we are confronting today. Great deal of polarization, lack of trust, and great deal of economic uncertainty, which is not helpful to any kind of investments, including ethical investments, including ESG asset classes, and any kind of long-term finance as well should factor in all of these challenges. I'm saying that while I would say that the ASEAN region has been less directly affected than other regions, especially in terms of the impact on grain imports, but the impacts are nevertheless severe if you put into consideration the impact on the rest of the world and the impact on some of the major regions as trading partners with the ASEAN. And some of the areas of growth and sustainable development in the ASEAN countries is very much as open economies dependent on higher growth rates around the world, higher trade volumes, and higher flows of investments. So dealing with these disruptions and shocks is very much warranted. I like to put my comments in the context of the fact that Egypt, my home country, is hosting the COP 27 this year in November. And we are now considering the main deliverables that should be expected from this COP. And in what way a COP hosted in a developing economy, an African economy, an Arab economy, and a Mediterranean economy with excellent relations around the world, including with the ASEAN countries, should be different from other COPs. I think it's fair to say that there is a great deal of building on the outcomes and the results of previous conferences of the UN FCCC and the recent COP in Glasgow. In addition, of course, monitoring the progress and performance vis-a-vis the commitments related to the Paris Agreement of 2015. But in addition to this deliverable, which I consider the bread and butter of any COP that you need really to consider what happened in the previous years, I would really outline 5 areas for your attention. The first, especially in times of crisis, it's important really to have a kind of a holistic approach in dealing with the climate agenda. Any kind of a reductionist angle to sustainability to mean only climate change, and for climate change to mean only efforts towards mitigation and decarbonization, and having a kind of a price to carbon, it's very much going not to deliver on what we are going to expect from this COP. I'm not undermining the importance of mitigation. I'm not undermining the importance of having a price on carbon, but a holistic approach. By that, I mean all aspects related to mitigation, all issues related to adaptation, and dealing with the controversial file related to loss and damage, and of course, finance need to be all included. Perhaps we need to put that in the context of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, especially with the kind of challenges that our world are facing. You cannot talk about climate action without being mindful to the eventual impact on poverty or on unemployment or food security or access to energy or in better water management. The good thing is that the technological solutions and best practices are giving us good approaches if they are coordinated better with good data and good adequate finance. We can really achieve these goals and targets together. So we put the SDGs with emphasis on SDG 13 if you are after a kind of a more holistic approach, but the critical minimum is to deal with climate action as a mix of efforts with very good coordination to deal with mitigation, adaptation, loss and damage, and the issues related to finance. The second part is about promotion of stronger focus on implementation. We have heard for many years good pledges, good phrases of love and affection to the planet and the people and how we should protect them. But when it comes to implementation and delivery, we leave a lot to be desired collectively. So it could be fair to say it's about time then, given that we have seen great deal of commitments and pledges, it's to see some of the deliverables and good projects in the field. And with these projects, we can see better investments and better job opportunities. The third aspect and of relevance to the ASEAN, that this COP is emphasizing, in addition to the global perspective of climate, the regional approach. And there is going to be 5 regional roundtables about the opportunities of investments, getting the GFANs or the Glasgow Alliance that had the top asset managers from around the world. They have assets under management of more than $130 trillion as announced back in November 2021, and they committed to the net zero efforts and the race to zero with priorities on mitigation and decarbonization. At the same time, we need really to have these funds matched with project pipeline, and hence comes the idea of having these regional roundtables to have alignments between the supply of investable and bankable projects with the promise of finance, either from the GFANs, the Glasgow Alliance, or from other sources of funding. And I think with the good examples demonstrated by the ASEAN and its model of collaboration, there could be very good opportunities. And as you know, the Regional Economic Commission of Asia is hosted in Thailand, one of the ASEAN countries, and we're going to be having our meeting there very soon with emphasis on public-private partnerships. But there will be other roundtables in Africa, Latin America, in the Arab world, and in the rest of the world in Geneva as well. The fourth aspect of emphasis is the localization of the efforts. Egypt as a host is adopting a kind of a bottom-up approach to the agenda of the climate action to make sure that local communities, municipalities, active members of the society at large would have their own say, in addition to the variety of projects that you would expect from the small to the biggest projects, including women-led projects and startups. My final point is on finance. Without finance and investment, all of the above will be compromised. It's about data, finance, and implementation that we can really get the climate action on track. And we know very well that we are not on track based on the recent IPCC report that had shown us deviation of around 60% of targets. Instead of reducing emissions by 45%, we are increasing the emissions by 14%. Again, issues related to finance, not just the famous $100 billion promised since Copenhagen, but investments that should really be coming from the private sector. I mentioned just now the GFANs, but there could be as well the different commitments from the business community, either domestic business community or from international finance. There is the important role in a world that is facing growing debt and accumulation of outstanding debt in unprecedented rates, is to adopt some debt reduction mechanism. And my plea for the G20, which is hosted in an ASEAN member country, in Indonesia, is to consider the debt for climate investment and debt for nature investment as an option going forward. There is a need as well for international collaboration to establish carbon markets, and there could be good models on that. We know that Europe have done a great deal of work on establishing its emission trading system, and there is an active market there. But and they have been collaborating with the Southeast Asian countries, and of course with China. It could be as well a good partnership, South-South perhaps, on how to establish good carbon markets that are compatible with the priorities of the emerging markets and developing economies. In addition to that, I would expect that issues related to what we really mean by ESG, what we really mean by ethics when it comes to finance, that we need to avoid greenwashing. And there have been a great deal of interest in this about the metric, which metric that we're applying, how the different metric adopted by different agencies could be comparable. And I look forward to the work that is led by the former Minister of Climate and Environment of Canada, Minister McKenna, a committee that had been formed by the UN Secretary General to provide a kind of stock taking on our knowledge and what went right and what went wrong, what are the best practices, what are the best codes and procedures to be applied. However, nothing of that all will be done without starting from home, by having a budget of the state that is reflecting its priorities when it comes to sustainability, including SDGs and climate action. If you have that kind of SDG budgets, that would allow the private sector to get its signals right from it. It would allow some good accountability on the public finance and how it is aligned with the priorities of the SDGs. And then we can really enhance the mobilization of funds where it really matters, from public and private to domestic and external sources of finance, to achieve the ambitious goals of sustainable development, ESG, and climate action. And all of them should be carefully tailored and aligned. Thank you so much. And it has been indeed a pleasure to speak to you. And I hope that I can welcome you all in Sharm el-Sheikh in November in Egypt.